Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited. The NBA draft lottery has come and gone. We have the actual NBA draft order now, which makes all of these NBA mock drafts way better. I'm super excited for this part of the 2024 NBA draft process. I hope you guys are as well. Right now I'm trying to tough it out for you guys. I am very much under the weather. I've been covering NBA playoff games and I am exhausted, to be completely honest with you. But I'm still bringing content because that's how much you guys mean to me. I hope you do enjoy the content today. If you do, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more content as well. It lets me know I'm doing a good job here. So now let's jump into that actual mock draft. And I do have a couple of important notes. First of all, the official draft order is set. Like I said in the open, that is one of the most important parts of the entire process. We now have the actual draft order for picks 1 through 58 in this year's draft. This mock draft video will specifically cover picks 1 through 14. Like I said, I'm a little under the weather. I want you guys to be able to enjoy the content here. I want you guys to have a good time watching this video. I'm just not sure if my voice can handle the typical 30 picks in the first round, just with where I'm currently at from a health standpoint. So picks 15 through 30 will be up on the Utility Sports Twitter page. I typically have not used Twitter to share a lot of mock drafts and details on mocks, but I am going to do that for this one. I especially thought, since the lottery just happened, timeout picks 1 through 14 in a video would be very fitting, and then having picks 15 through 30 up on Twitter would probably kind of give satisfaction to people who are looking for the entire first round. So if you're one of those people looking for the entire first round, go check out Utility Sports Twitter. Go give us a follow on there as well. That would be greatly appreciated. And now here we are, pick number 1. The Atlanta Hawks have the first overall selection. And what a special time it is to be an Atlanta fan. Kirk Cousins in free agency, you draft Michael Penix. The Atlanta Falcons look like they're cooking something special. The Atlanta Braves are having a very good season as well. Now the Atlanta Hawks might be on a path back to real relevancy in the NBA. There are going to be a lot of trade rumors surrounding the Atlanta Hawks. May or may not have a video coming out on that very soon. Stay tuned for that one. But the Atlanta Hawks, first overall, have a real question to answer, and it's how do we turn this team that has a lot of cap space concerns and a lot of financial situations ahead of themselves, how do they turn them into a winner over the course of the next 2 to 4 years? And I think there's one player specifically in this year's draft that just stands out as an obvious number 1 selection, even though there were a lot of questions coming into the year. People saying, well, we don't know who the top pick is going to be. Over the last month or so, I feel like I have really cemented myself on one specific player that stands head and shoulders above the rest. And that player here is who the Hawks will pick first overall. Forward/center Alex Sarr from the Perth Wildcats. Spent some time with the Overtime Elite program. Knows the Atlanta area very well from my understanding, and I think will be a fantastic fit with the Atlanta Hawks for a few different reasons. First of all, I want to talk about the offensive side of the ball. Some of the things that I maybe haven't touched on as much as I should have with who Alex Sarr is as a prospect. I think there is emerging playmaking potential here from the forward or center spot, whatever way you view him being in the NBA. I think he's a little bit further along with his playmaking off of a live dribble and playing off the catch on short rolls than most people have really paid attention to or given notice to. And I think that is a super important aspect here, whether it's with DeJounte Murray or Trae Young, whichever one of those two guards stays in Atlanta long term. I think having a dynamic role man, specifically with Trae Young, would be a very unique situation that the Hawks have just not put around Trae Young up to this point of his career. Now, you do think, yes, Clint Capella is someone who's a very good long roller, a good above-the-rim lob threat. Alex Sarr can give you that as well with his length at 7'1", very athletic, can definitely finish above the rim. Not something he does as frequently as he should, but he's capable of it. I think in Atlanta, though, where you'd find some real success with him is Trae Young's unique ability as a passer and a shooter to stretch the floor. You can hit Alex Sarr on short rolls right around the free throw line or so. And then with the remaining threats on Atlanta's roster, whether that's Bogdan Bogdanovic as a three-point shooter, Jalen Johnson as a weak side lob threat, dunker spot sitter, you have a unique ability to weaponize the rest of your offensive players through the two-man game of Trae Young and Alex Sarr. So I think Sarr's offensive potential obviously stands out to me in Atlanta better than it would have in other situations. And then I think defensively, Sarr is really what you're hoping to see from a number 1 overall pick when it comes to the upside that he possesses on that end of the floor. He is extremely long, tall, and athletic. Those are kind of the holy trinity of being a great defensive player in the NBA. Do you have size? Do you have length? And are you mobile? The answer to all of those questions for Alex Sarr is a resounding yes. And then defensively as well, I think he has fantastic feel. There are a lot of plays throughout his short pro career in the NBL where he detaches himself from his own man to go and make a help side rejection. Now, I think there's going to be a learning curve with that. Obviously, at times, teams set you up for that in the NBA. You think about Nikola Jokic with Aaron Gordon in the NBA. There's times where Nikola Jokic wants you to think he's the main target, the main scoring threat, so that he can float a lob up to Aaron Gordon. Sarr's going to have some moments where he has a steep learning curve ahead of him for sure, but I think his overall defensive feel and his defensive instincts paint him as one of the better rim protectors we've evaluated in the recent years. Obviously, guys like Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren stand out as better ones, but Alex Sarr is near the top of the list as a potential rim protector. Not sure if he's a true anchor yet. I'm not sure if the defensive rebounding's there or not for him to be a true anchor to an NBA defense, but he is at worst going to be a very, very good weak side shot blocker. Throughout the process, I've compared him multiple times to Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't think it's the perfect comp. I think their games are different, but from a loose style of play, the way that they're going to impact shots on the defensive side of the ball, I think Sarr is probably the closest thing to Jaren Jackson Jr. we have seen in recent years. And I think for the ATL, you're getting a player who not only fits what this team really badly needed from the center spot, but you're also getting a player who could be dynamic offensively alongside either one of Trae Young or DeJounte Murray moving forward. Then we transition here into pick number 2, and I'm extremely happy for the Washington Wizards, a team that just started their rebuild last year when they traded away Kristaps Porzingis, most importantly Bradley Beal. Somehow got value for that albatross of a contract. I was surprised back then, still surprised now how they were able to get that done. And the Washington Wizards are sitting in a much better spot today than they were 12 months ago because of that. And I'm very happy for Wizards fans getting a pick in the top 2 here. Even though it's not pick 1, I think Alex Sarr would have been a home run pick for them. I still think at pick number 2, they can go a number of different ways. I thought about Zaccharie Risacher from France, someone who can obviously shoot the ball extremely well, plays off the catch very well, could be a nice build with piece for Washington. And I also considered Nikola Topic. The Wizards, who, yes, they found more success at the end of the year, finally having Jordan Poole on the basketball more regularly, they still could use a true floor general playmaking type of point guard, and someone with like Topic who has the passing vision and the feel to be an elite play creator for others. He would make some sense as a beginning piece in Washington. However, it then dawned on me as I thought about where the Wizards were picking. Second overall, my initial thoughts were maybe they'd trade down out of this spot. What would the Wizards do? I then paused and I thought about the 2025 and 2026 draft classes, because I think for a team like Washington, who is so early in their rebuild, the last thing that they should be is short-sighted in their first ever draft post-rebuild. And because of that, for that specific reason, I think Washington should address a huge need here. A player that I think is going to be an awesome floor raiser down the line. Not the player with the highest potential, not the player who's going to turn this team into a 40-win team, but there's reasons for that. In the first year of your rebuild, getting a generational player, which, by the way, this draft class does not have to begin with, getting someone who's going to really raise your ceiling doesn't necessarily help you get a whole bunch of high draft picks in a row. And for a long time, I've said, if you want to draft a center, you have to do so 2 or 3 years before you really need them to be a high impact player. To win NBA games, you need veteran play from the center spot. So the Wizards are going to get that out of the way early here. Second overall, they're going to select center Donovan Clingan from UConn. And I know this is going to be met with some harsh skepticism from Wizards fans. Trust me, this is the best pick that they can possibly make here. I like other players more than Donovan Clingan, but for the Wizards specifically, when it comes to some of the upcoming players in future drafts, you think about Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, you think about Dylan Harper, you think about some of these other prospects coming up, AJ Dybonsa in the 2026 draft. There are a lot of prospects that the Wizards are going to be in position to potentially draft. With the lottery, with their draft assets that they have to trade, maybe move up and get one of those guys, the Wizards are in a spot where they should not be focused solely on upside swings here in their first ever draft. Instead, in the future drafts, there's not a lot of centers toward the top of the list. Getting Donovan Clingan here, who is a very good pro-ready player, someone who is going to step in and be a starting center on night one of his NBA career for Washington. This addresses a huge flaw, a huge team need. He's a fantastic rebounder, a shot blocker, a true defensive anchor. I think the Wizards, who need to take significant strides forward on the defensive end of the floor, they get a great big man here who can help them in that area. He's also a tremendous screen setter. And over the next couple of years of their rebuild, that's when you add in the big-time upside players, the Cooper Flaggs, the AJ Dybonsas, the Cameron Boozers of the world. 2025, 2026, 2027 drafts will be huge for Washington, adding those franchise-defining players. Here you're getting a player second overall who we know is going to be good. Donovan Clingan is going to be an awesome drop coverage big. He's going to protect the rim. He's going to block shots. He's going to set great screens, and he's got fantastic hands. He does a lot of the things you need a good center to do in the NBA. Now for Washington, it's about adding pieces around him in future drafts. It's not the most exciting thing, but it's the right thing to do here if you're the Wizards GM, and I expect Michael Winger, Will Dawkins to get it right in this year's draft. Moving on to pick number 3, we have the Houston Rockets. One of the big surprises from the draft lottery, moving all the way up to pick number 3, of course. Just crazy how the Rockets have positioned themselves. Last year in my best futures video, I had the Rockets very high in that video, and this was part of the reason behind that. With the influx of extra picks that they have coming up, they have a top 3 pick after winning 40 plus games this season. They're going to be able to add more young talent to an already existing quality core that is still improving. Alperen Şengün taking steps forward. Jalen Green taking steps forward. Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore maybe have limitless potentials, and yet they're still adding top draft picks, and they might be for the next couple of years depending on how the Brooklyn Nets end up. So the Rockets here I still think are in a fantastic spot. There's a player here who I think is going to help them a ton in Zaccharie Risacher from France, a player who, listen, the shooting, it's obviously been a main topic of discussion here on the channel. When he's been shooting it really well, he's been a cemented number 1 pick. When he hasn't been shooting it well, he's been kind of in flux. Is he pick number 2? Is he pick number 5? Where does he go? I have him going 3rd here to Houston because I do think his overall play style is going to provide some good off-ball spacing for him. Even when he's not shooting it well, he moves very well off the ball, whether that's lifting up from the corner, diving down into the corner. He's just a natural off-ball mover, and I think next to Green, next to Amen Thompson, next to Cam Whitmore, guys who understand that off-ball spacing and how to find crevices in the defense to get open looks are going to be extremely vital. So I think Risacher already makes a ton of sense from that component. And I also think I've been short selling what he's able to do off of the catch. Now, obviously his primary skill set coming into the league is going to be his shooting. That's going to be, at his size, one of the most important elements of his translation to the league. But I think outside of just him being able to get his shot off and knock down perimeter jump shots, he is a better player off the catch than most people have given him credit for. He has a very strong right to left rip through. He can get to the rim and finish. Obviously has the length and size to probably grow into a good overall two-level score, at both the three-point line and at the rim. Now, we'll see what that mid-range jump shot ends up becoming. I don't really think that's the most important element to his game. If he were to become a superstar or an all-star level player, that mid-range jump shot would definitely be essential for him. But I think in the role that I'm projecting him to play there for Houston, finishing at the rim, finishing behind the three-point line, those are the 2 key elemental skills that are going to get him on the basketball court. The rich get richer here with Houston. A team that already has a ton of young talent gets the opportunity to add even more young talent if they don't trade this pick before or on draft night. Pick number 4, the San Antonio Spurs here now. And San Antonio, what an exciting lottery for them. They now have 2 picks in the top 8 as well, something I've talked at length about as a real possibility this draft cycle. And here we are now. We have the order. The Spurs have picks 4 and pick 8, so they have 2 great opportunities to add talent. And 4th overall, I think the no-brainer decision here for the San Antonio Spurs is to select guard Nikola Topic, playing overseas, part of the EuroLeague, playing for Red Star, and then also spent some time this year with Megabasket. Playing for Megabasket, who's extremely productive as both a scorer and a facilitator, averaging over 7 assists per game. In Megabasket now in the EuroLeague, his productivity and overall efficiency has gone down a little bit. But if you look at what he's been able to do in his minutes, obviously he's played a smaller role for Red Star. he has still been pretty productive in those minutes. And I think overall, if you're evaluating him as a prospect, I think the skill set's the most important thing to evaluate, and his physical tools as well with that skill set. And for San Antonio, a team that right now it's basically a blank canvas. You have Victor Wembanyama, you have Devin Vassell, you have some other nice ancillary role players like a Jeremy Sohan, for example. It's about how do you want to build this team around that young core? How do you want to build this team around this young nucleus? And with 2 picks in the top 10 this year, you could go really any direction you want. You could draft some bigger forwards. You could try and put a ton of length on the floor, try and mimic something like what Minnesota's doing right now with Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. You could also try and do something like Denver's doing, where you have somewhat traditional positional size across the floor. Now, MPJ is a little bit bigger than a normal small forward, of course. Aaron Gordon's extremely strong at power forward, but it's not like they're a huge team, but they're a very well-balanced team skill set-wise. I think the Spurs are going to kind of go in between those two models. I think they're going to try and value positional size when it makes sense, but I think they're also going to look for skill sets that they're lacking right now. And even though Tre Jones, I do think is a quality point guard, someone who could be a very high quality backup point guard, I think you're still looking for that cream of the crop facilitator for your starting unit. I think Nikola Topic fits that bill here. 4th overall for the Spurs. He's one of the most dynamic, creative passers we have in this entire draft. In fact, probably the most dynamic and creative passer. He has the ability to control and manipulate defenses with his eyes. He can pass to the weak side of the floor in pick and rolls. I think he has an underrated element to his offensive game as a scorer, utilizing his quickness in short areas. He's not the most athletic, fastest prospect you're ever going to see, of course, but he does do a good job of getting the defense on its heels and then being able to attack into gaps by utilizing his change of speed, change of direction a bit to his advantage. Even though he's, again, not the most prolific scorer of the basketball, not the most prolific athlete, I think he's going to be good enough in those areas while also being able to utilize the gravity of his teammates with the spacing that Wembanyama is going to provide him, not only laterally on the floor, but also vertically as a lob threat and someone you can put the ball up in the air. And guess what? Wemby's going to be the one to go catch it. I also think he's going to be able to maximize Devin Vassell as a scorer. I think Topic is just a great pickup here for the Spurs. A tremendous option, 4th overall, and I think San Antonio does a great job here netting him with this pick. Moving on now to pick number 5, and the Detroit Pistons are here. I'm sorry, Pistons fans. I tried reverse jinxing you guys, giving you some good luck that maybe you'd end up in the top 3, top 2 in this year's draft. Just did not happen. The Pistons fell down to pick number 5 for the 3rd consecutive year. Remember last year they had the worst record, fell to pick 5. The year before that they had the 3rd worst record, fell to pick 5. Now in the process they got 2 really good prospects. They got Jaden Ivey and they also got Ausar Thompson. So the Pistons can still get good players at 5th overall, and I think this year is not another example of that. I think this year is not an exception. This is a draft where they can add more talent in the top 5, assuming they don't trade this pick. And 5th overall, I have them selecting forward Matas Buzelis here from G League Ignite. Obviously, I think a big factor in this decision is the owner-agency relationship here. Matas Buzelis' agent does have a familial relationship with a Pistons minority owner. So that already is a very important part of the process to consider. Agents and their relationships with teams, front offices, ownership is obviously always a key part of draft night decisions, whether or not you like it. But I also do think from an actual basketball standpoint here, Matas Buzelis does make a good deal of sense 5th overall for Detroit. Even if that agent relationship did not exist, I would have strongly considered mocking Matas Buzelis 5th overall here to Detroit because of his overall prospect profile. He stands at about 6'10". I think he's a very underrated athlete, both vertically and laterally. I think he changes directions extremely well, both on the basketball and off of it defensively. With his overall skill set, I think he's still a growing shooter. He hasn't really knocked down the consistent three-point shot that you've wanted to see, especially if you're a Pistons fan who's looking to add shooting around Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey. You need to add consistent, reliable shooting. Matas Buzelis hasn't been that, unfortunately, thus far in his early career, both in high school and his early pro career playing for the G League Ignite program. But I do think Detroit, with the current situation, picking 5th overall, they're in a spot here where getting a player who fits positionally into their roster and another guy who's capable of making a play off the bounce, attacking closeouts, getting to spots on the floor. He works the baseline extremely well. Offensively, he can give you a really unique option that is comfortable playing off of the basketball, and I think that could be really beneficial for both Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. Now, again, this doesn't prompt and promote the best offensive spacing from a three-point perspective, but I do think Buzelis, from an overall spacing perspective, works the baseline better than most of their already current existing options on the roster, and that's just as important when we talk about spacing. It's not just three-point shooting, it's about where you align on the floor, where you're comfortable attacking off the dribble, and I think Buzelis does so a little bit differently than some of the other Pistons players already in place there in Detroit. Moving on to pick number 6, we are now looking at the Charlotte Hornets here. A bummer for them that they fell out of the top 4 completely, but 6th overall, I still think they're in a good spot to get a talented young player. There's 2 that I really went back and forth between here. The first one I strongly considered was guard Stephon Castle, someone who I think could be a really key essential piece defensively for them around LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, as someone who would probably take the primary assignment most nights at the NBA level defensively. Now, I didn't go that direction in this mock because I do think there's a player who maybe promotes a little bit more offensive equilibrium into their kind of shot diet and shot selection, something that we saw the Phoenix Suns struggle with in their most recent playoff series with the Minnesota Timberwolves, where they just didn't have enough rim pressure, and because of that, the Wolves could really pressure them on the ball, knowing that they're not going to take them all the way to the rack, and I think the Hornets maybe a little liable of that as well with their current roster setup. LaMelo Ball obviously a little bit more reliant on floaters, and his three-point shot, Brandon Miller, that's kind of the cream of the crop for him, is his three-point shot, his finesse, his touch. Now, we did see Miller get to the rim and finish above the rim quite a bit as well as a rookie, so I'm not putting a limit on Miller's game and his development, but I do think they just could use a little bit more downhill dynamism, and this is perhaps the most downhill dynamic player in this entire draft class. Guard/forward Ron Holland from G League Ignite. So we have back-to-back G League Ignite prospects going off the board here, 5th and 6th overall in Buzelis and Holland. And I think Holland specifically really fits what Charlotte needs from both an effort, energy, motor standpoint, as well as an actual skill set and scoring standpoint. With Charlotte, again, I've talked at length about their need for more downhill finishing guys who are going to get them to the free throw line, put teams in foul trouble, get on the free throw line and actually just give you easy points throughout the course of the game. I think Ron Holland's going to do that. And then defensively, he's also got very active hands. I think he's got a high motor. And of course, he's one of the more athletic players in this year's draft. At times, it feels like he floats instead of jumps. He's just a really intriguing athlete with his ability to score at the rim. I think he maximizes his athleticism as well when he's attacking the rim. Now, kind of similar to what we talked about with Anthony Edwards back in 2020, one of the big things about Ron Holland, I think, for me, is making sure that he's consistently getting to the rim. You don't want him settling for pull-up jumpers, pull-up threes in transition. I think for him specifically, it's how do we maximize his game, get to the rim as frequently as possible, and I think that's a mindset thing for him. So in Charlotte, with LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, I think Holland's going to have to be a dynamic cutter. I think there's going to be some areas where he still has a lot to learn, of course. He's a very young prospect. So I'm not looking at this as a polished, okay, this is what gets Charlotte into the playoffs next year, but I think this is the player that long-term could be the missing link in what the Hornets need to form a really dynamic, offensive-minded trio from their 1 through 3 spots with Miller, Holland, and Ball going forward. Then we have the Portland Trailblazers. They also fell down in the lottery quite a bit, but they do have 2 picks in the lottery, pick 7 and pick number 14. So a really great chance here for them to add significant talent still on a roster that, quite frankly, really needs it. 7th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers going with guard Stephon Castle out of UConn. Just didn't really know what to do with this pick, to be completely honest with you. I think the Blazers could really use a forward, but I wasn't exactly sure if they were in a spot with Buzelis off the board to really take one here with this pick. They still have a pick at 14. We are going to address a forward spot with that selection. For me here, I went best player available, and I think Stephon Castle is going to be viewed as that by a lot of teams and a lot of organizations, as we've seen players like Derek White really find a lot of success throughout the league. Guys who just are impactful winners, can fill a number of gaps for a team both offensively and defensively. I think Stephon Castle has a lot of that similar DNA and makeup to him, where he's a guy who, again, you're going to use him to guard the other team's best ball handler. For Portland, I think that's something that you definitely need still, even around Anthony Simons and around Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. I know people are going to say, oh, the Blazers don't need another guard. I totally understand that criticism here of this mock, but I just think best player available here at the Portland Trail Blazers are not a very good team. They are still in talent acquisition mode, and I think Stephon Castle is a very different player than anyone else they have on roster currently. I think he's someone who's going to hit the offensive glass as a guard. He's going to be a very good corner crasher. And then from an upside perspective, I think he's got way more of an electric handle than anyone really knows about. He even referenced that himself during the NBA draft lottery on live television. He said, look, there's things to my game that I didn't get to showcase at UConn. And he wasn't mad about that. He referenced winning a national championship and how great that was, but I think he's onto something. I think there's more to his game as a live ball creator, pick and roll ball handler. I think there are things that he is capable of doing that we just didn't get to see the full picture of because UConn ran a very balanced offense, a very pro-styled offense. It didn't just promote Stephon Castle as a draft prospect, but what it did do is it led to a lot of winning, and I think Stephon Castle is going to be a prospect that helps other teams win in the NBA as well. So even though Portland kind of already has a loaded backcourt, I still think best player available here makes a good deal of sense. This was the hardest pick in the mock here for me to land on, but I do think it's ultimately a good one for the Blazers. Pick number 8, we move on back to the San Antonio Spurs now. Remember, 4th overall, they went with guard Nikola Topic, and I talked about how, getting a lot of positional size could be really awesome for them, but 8th overall, there's a player here who, even though he doesn't have a ton of positional size, really has a skill set that I think would be a perfect fit alongside not only Victor Wembanyama, but also Nikola Topic here in San Antonio. And that means shooting. We need to get some real floor spacing, some real shooting gravity on the court there in San Antonio. If you want to make life easy for Victor Wembanyama, you get a player who can shoot the basketball, but this player does a lot more than just that. This guy can dribble, pass, shoot. 8th overall, I have the Spurs selecting guard Reed Sheppard from Kentucky. I'm very, very high on this kid. Not only do the analytics adore him, but so does my eye test. Someone who, when I watch him play, I just trust when he has the basketball that something good is going to happen. Now, it doesn't always happen, right? He is still a young prospect. He's learning, growing, and maturing his game, of course. But I think for San Antonio specifically, while yes, you're going to have Nikola Topic, he's going to become your primary pick and roll ball handler, your primary creator. Basketball is just not played that way. Nobody has a 100% usage rate. No one has the ball 100% of the game. Not even the Luka Doncic, Tyrese Halliburtons of the world have the ball in their hands that much. So I think for San Antonio, having someone with secondary creation upside, people have been concerned, is Reed Sheppard a primary point guard? How many pick and rolls? I don't really care. What I do care about is winning basketball games, and I think Reed Sheppard's going to be someone who promotes that because he's able to toggle on-ball and off-ball responsibilities. You want to know why the Atlanta Hawks haven't worked out very well? It's because Trae Young doesn't toggle between on-ball and off-ball responsibilities very well with DeJounte Murray. As a result, the Hawks haven't won very many games. Do I think Reed Sheppard can toggle between on-ball and off-ball responsibilities on the offensive end? I 100% do. You mirror that with his insane steal rate because he's got very active and quick hands. I think he's a high IQ player, someone who understands how to not only fill the passing lanes, but also has a pretty good idea of how his matchup's trying to beat him off the dribble. I think with Reed Sheppard, you're looking at a player who is going to be a very high-impact winner at the NBA level. I think he's going to be a better Austin Reeves. Now, he's not as big as Austin Reeves, maybe not even as athletic as Austin Reeves, but he shoots way better than him, and I think he can dribble and pass at a similar quality. And even though Austin Reeves hasn't been a super high-volume pick-and-roll player his whole career so far, he's still been a very good player for the Los Angeles Lakers. So I think the Spurs here, this is the icing on top of the cake. They get Nikola Topic, who's your primary pick-and-roll ball handler, your primary offense creator for Victor Wembanyama, but then you also get a gravity shooter off of those two who can still handle the basketball a bit, make decisions off of a live handle. This is a home run draft for the San Antonio Spurs, who get not one, but two super high-impact guards who are going to be fantastic fits next to Wembanyama moving forward. Now we move on to pick number 9, and this is where the Memphis Grizzlies are. In a lot of my past mocks, I had them going with Donovan Clingan, but this mock, huge shakeup, Donovan Clingan goes 2nd overall to the Washington Wizards. So who do I ultimately land on here for Memphis to select? And obviously you could look at wing, you could look at maybe other centers. There's a couple that maybe would be a little too early to take here if you're Memphis, but it is still a big need. 9th overall, I went with guard Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky. So I strayed away from both forward and center here for Memphis in favor of an off-the-bench guard for the Grizzlies. And listen, they already have a lot of perimeter players. Obviously, they have Desmond Bane, they have John Morant, and Marcus Smart. Those are all key essential pieces. But I think one thing about Memphis, they're going to look far and wide for a center this offseason. Maybe a Nick Claxton could make some sense in a sign and trade. We'll see what happens there. But guard Rob Dillingham, I think just best player available here. And for the Grizzlies, who might not ever have another top 10 pick during John Morant's prime, this is a good opportunity to not only find someone who can be a very serviceable off-the-bench scorer for you, but also someone who could become a floor general off the bench as well. And I think they have missed that Tyus Jones a little bit since trading him this past offseason. They also missed that Kyle Anderson playmaking a little bit. The Grizzlies, for a long time, had a lot of playmaking surrounding John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. They no longer have that. So I know people are going to look at Rob Dillingham as this microwave scorer, this offensive engine who's going to create his own shot. He's a very dynamic pick and roll ball handler. Obviously, he has the scoring gravity, which is one of the most important things to consider when you're evaluating a pick and roll ball handler. Do teams have to respect him as a scorer? The answer for Dillingham is a clear and resounding yes. But then off of that, he has the playmaking vision to create and really open up opportunities for his teammates. Averaged over 6 assists per 40 minutes this past year at Kentucky, even coming off the bench in a role where he was expected to score. He still found a real level of success as a facilitator as well. So I think for Memphis here specifically, this is a rare opportunity to get a guy who I do believe in long-term, his talent level. They've been swinging and missing at forwards for a long time. You think back to Zaire Williams, you think to Jake LaRavia, you think to David Roddy. They've been swinging and they've been missing a lot. I think this is a good time to get a player who I'm very confident is going to be good in the NBA. That's why I went with Rob Dillingham here, 9th overall. Pick number 10, the Utah Jazz here now on the clock. Obviously tough for them as well to fall down a couple of spots in this draft now. Just with the reality that they've traded out 2 future Hall of Famers in Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. This team was this close to winning a championship, you could argue, if they had maybe 1 or 2 more 3-and-D players on the roster that were capable of really guarding and creating some offense just a little bit. Instead, they traded away their 2 foundational pieces, and now they're at a spot where, look, they have all of these draft picks, but none of them have been top 5 yet. So 10th overall, they have to swing on a guy who I think has that potential for them. I think they did very good last year with Taylor Hendricks and Keontae George. Now I think 10th overall is a prime opportunity to add some even higher upside here. And for me, that is forward Cody Williams of Colorado. This just feels like a Danny Ainge pick. Cody Williams is a wing who can handle the basketball, gets to the rim at will, one of the better drivers of the basketball in college this past year. And I think he's also someone who in transition gives them some real life. And really, if everything goes right for Cody Williams, what you see him maybe blossoming into is a downhill creator for driving kick opportunities. And if you look at Utah's current existing roster, I think Walker Kessler would be really benefited by that. Having someone else exert some rim pressure off of the dribble, creating lob opportunities for him, I think that would be really wonderful for the Jazz offense and making Kessler really work offensively. And then I think also you look at Lauri Markkanen, someone who over 80% of his shots this past year were generated off of assist opportunities. So for Utah, I think just more creation upside, more offensive bets in creation. I did for the longest time think about swapping the 2 picks between Memphis and Utah. Should Memphis go with Cody Williams and should the Jazz get Rob Dillingham? I really went back and forth between those 2 different scenarios, but ultimately I felt like Memphis is going to take the player they perceive to be better at this point in time, which I think Dillingham does have a little bit stronger tape currently, but Cody Williams definitely has the upside to intrigue someone like Danny Ainge, who typically drafts wings with a lot of upside. Think back to him selecting Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown there in Boston in back-to-back years. I think he would be very happy to select Cody Williams. The Jazz are very thin on forwards and wings. They just really don't have any on the roster. They have a lot of bigs and a lot of smalls. They need some of those wing-sized players, and I think Cody Williams, not only does he fit the positional size flexibility that they need, but I think his skill set makes sense around their existing roster, as is already too. Pick number 11, we move on to the Chicago Bulls, and this is another difficult pick for me here to mock because the Bulls, I feel like, just need a lot. With the questions around Zach LaVine's future there in Chicago, obviously we don't know what DeMar DeRozan's going to have happen in free agency. Nikola Vucevic just did not play very well this past year. They really need center, they need wings, they need guards, they need everything. So 11th overall, what I landed on here for the same reason that I had the Wizards go with a center at pick number 2. I think before you're going to play a center big time heavy minutes, I'm talking 30 plus minutes a game, trying to promote winning basketball, you need him to have 1 or 2 years of real experience. So 11th overall, I have the Chicago Bulls selecting center Kel'el Ware out of Indiana. Someone who, he has 2 years of college basketball experience. His first year just didn't go to plan there with the Oregon Ducks, but the second year under coach Mike Woodson with Indiana just was a completely different story. He was utilized heavily in the offense. I think as a post scorer really impressed me. I look at him more as a pick and roll lob finisher and a rim roller, but he found some real success as a post-up player at the collegiate level. Now, it's a big part of Hoosiers basketball. It's a big part of how Indiana wants to play. I'm not exactly expecting that to translate fully to the NBA, but what that does show is a good level of touch, a good amount of poise as well, playing in and around traffic, around the rim, being relied upon as a primary scorer, even though that's not going to be his role in the NBA. I think those are all positive things that are going to help him adjust to the NBA, playing around more length, size, and athleticism. I think Kel'el Ware has the chops to match that type of physicality, size, and athleticism. But I also think from an actual role standpoint, as you scale his role down a little bit, I think you're going to find more efficiency. He also flirted with the 3-ball and had some pretty good success on it at the collegiate level. So for Chicago here, you're getting an interesting big man prospect who I think will take a year or two before we really know what he is at the NBA level. But behind Vucevic, you need to start blossoming and growing your own talent. And I think Kel'el Ware is going to be one of the best opportunities here for Chicago to slowly start making inroads towards real relevancy and hopefully playoff success again at some point in the near future. Pick number 12, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder here. Now this pick comes from the Houston Rockets, part of the Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul swap from a half decade ago or so. And the Thunder here now at this spot, obviously Cody Williams off the board. I'm sure some Thunder fans are very bummed about that, but they do have an opportunity to add something I still think that they could use more of. And that is just pure raw shooting. This team, listen, they do a good job shooting the basketball. They are an efficient shooting team, but it's on relatively low volume compared to where other teams around the league are. And that's what coaches are really focused on is, hey, we can afford to close out a little slower on these guys because they're a little more reluctant to actually pull the trigger on some of those threes. Now on the roster, Isaiah Joe obviously is a sniper, someone who has no problem getting up as many three-point opportunities as you allow him. And I think he's been an awesome part of Thunder basketball. I think you need more of that. I think you need more shooting. Obviously, Josh Giddey has had a rough playoff run because of his reluctancy to shoot and then just sometimes his failure to shoot the ball very well. I think OKC could just use one more shooter in the mix to really open up their drive and kick game to another level. And that player here is forward/guard Dalton Knecht out of Tennessee. And I think this is a really high quality pickup here for the Thunder for a few different reasons. First of all, as Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams become contract extension eligible over the next couple of off seasons, you're going to want cheap labor that is playoff ready to contribute. That's hard to find in the lottery because usually lottery picks are young guys who you're betting on potential and upside. Well, Dalton Knecht's going to be 23 on the night of the NBA draft, which is perfect here for OKC because not only will you get him for his rookie contract for very, very cheap, but then his second contract will likely be cost controlled as well because he's not going to be the type of player averaging 20 points a game where he's going to sign a max contract. Instead, he's going to be a player where you probably get him around the mid-level exception on that second contract if things go well. And look at that. You had a role player for ages 23 through 31 of his career for cost-controlled, effective basketball. And that is exactly what Oklahoma City needs, not only from a financial standpoint, but his skill set just makes a ton of sense as well. He's a high-volume three-point shooter, very adept at working off of the basketball, but also has shown the ability to create his own shot. And again, while that's not the way that OKC is going to likely use him all the time, think about shot clock winding down, balls in Knecht's hands, all of a sudden he has a 1 or 2 dribble pull-up to go to. It's not everything's a computer, right? Where, oh, well, we're going to have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander take 3 dribbles to the right, and then, he's going to have the ball in his hands for 18 seconds, and then he's going to create a pass for a wide open kickout. It just doesn't always play out like that. So having players who you see them fitting a certain kind of role and a certain style you want to play, and then if they're capable of doing more on top of that, like Knecht is, that's where you find real success. And I think Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder would completely nail this pick, drafting Knecht 12th overall. Moving on to pick number 13, we have the Sacramento Kings. as a fan of a Western Conference team, I was very worried about the Kings moving up in the lottery. I'm not going to lie. If this team would have gotten the first or second overall pick, it would have completely transformed what this roster looks like and would have completely transformed their real playoff legitimacy around Domantas Sabonis and around De'Aaron Fox. But I still think here, 13th overall, with the player that I'm going to mock to them, is going to make them a lot better, especially given Malik Monk's free agency status. They only have early bird rights on him. The likelihood that they lose him in free agency for nothing is extremely high. Watch for teams like Orlando, San Antonio, as well as a few others as well. Detroit maybe even could get in there to vie for Malik Monk's services. There's going to be more than that even. So don't rule out anyone right now for the Malik Monk sweepstakes because he is a very good NBA player that a lot of teams are going to have interest in. The Kings are going to be tasked with replacing some of that production. And I think 13th overall, the best player to do that here is guard Jared McCain from Duke, who earlier in the process for me, I kind of was consistently hovering between picks 18 and 25 for him. That's just not the case anymore. Over the last couple of months, just with how he ended the season, from a shooting perspective and just kind of my overall film study on him and where I'm at with him as a prospect, I think he has cemented himself as a lottery or very near lottery pick in this year's draft. I have him 13th overall here again to the Kings because I think his shooting off the dribble and off the catch are both very real. I think his ability to play off of Sabonis handoffs is going to be very dynamic, similar to Monk, but I also think with Monk's departure, the Kings are going to need a little bit more offensive creation off the dribble. That's what McCain can give them as well. And then when it comes to playing McCain next to De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, if he's not involved in the primary action, his shooting and his cutting as a secondary action or a secondary option is still going to be very viable and valuable for the Kings. So I think 13th overall, this is a very good pickup for them. It's not a pick in the top two. It doesn't scare me as much, but Jared McCain's still a very good prospect and someone who I think is going to help Sacramento a ton, especially in replacing Malik Monk's absence, which is going to be very, very hard to do. But I think McCain is built for this type of opportunity. And then pick number 14, the Portland Trailblazers here. Now this pick comes from the Golden State Warriors, through the Boston Celtics, through the Memphis Grizzlies. This pick has been traded multiple times. So here we are now, though, with Portland, 14th overall. Who do they use this pick on? Remember, earlier we went with guard Stephon Castle. We're going to add more positional size here. Castle has a ton of it as a guard, but now we're getting it in that forward spot like I promised earlier with forward Tidjane Salaun from Cholet, another LNB Pro A prospect, the second one to go here in the lottery in this mock draft. And I think Salaun is a very interesting option for the Blazers, who could just use flat out more size in their front court. You think about Jeremy Grant oftentimes playing power forward. He just does not rebound the ball very well. Salaun is still relatively raw, but I think with their collection of Chris Murray, Jabari Walker, I think Salaun would be the most skilled of the combination. And I think with the upside that he possesses as not only an athlete, but also someone who I think has an emerging three ball, someone who's going to be able to shoot, and he's going to be willing to shoot a bunch of threes, I think his game is going to translate relatively well to the NBA. Now, again, you're betting on him becoming a high-volume, high-efficiency three-point shooter with the way that he plays, and that's really the risk here, because if you don't get that from him, he's just an inefficient four-man. But I think for Portland specifically, with where they're at in their rebuild, they're willing to take that type of swing on Salaun, looking at his overall collection of physical traits, the fact that they didn't get a forward at pick number 7. You come out of this draft with Stephon Castle, who I think is more of an NBA-ready contributor, and then Tidjane Salaun, who's a little bit more of a project, a little bit more time needed to see his development through. I think Portland's okay with that. I think Portland looks at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, we added 2 good prospects, we added 2 good players in this year's draft. We need to continue implementing more talent around Anthony Simons and around Scoot Henderson. And I think the Blazers brass in their front office walked out of this draft pretty pleased with what they were able to accomplish. Now remember, picks 15 through 30 are done on Twitter, so go give us a follow on Twitter. Link is in the description for that. Don't want you guys to miss out on that opportunity to see who your favorite team is picking in the 15 to 30 range. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.